Welcome to Train Signal. This is the Implementing HTTPS Inspection lesson in the Forefront Threat Management Gateway 2010 training course. So what is HTTPS inspection? Well, that's what you're going to learn first in this lesson, followed by how you actually enable and manage HTTPS, including the HTTPS inspection certificate, which is a key part of an HTTPS inspection infrastructure. You'll learn how to generate a Threat Management Gateway HTTPS inspection certificate. And just as a note, HTTPS inspection is often abbreviated HTTPS with a lowercase I. You'll also learn how to exclude sites from HTTPS inspection so that you don't have to put them through this relatively resource-intensive task. You'll learn some certificate validation techniques as well as some ways you can notify users that HTTPS traffic is being inspected. And then we'll wrap up the lesson with a demonstration for implementing HTTPS inspection for GlobalMantics. At GlobalMantics, users that use SSL or HTTPS have the potential to fully bypass the GlobalMantics carefully crafted threat management gateway system. Traditional inspection systems don't have the ability to break through SSL encryption in order to be able to peek into packet contents to ensure that nothing nefarious is going on. GlobalMantics has asked you to implement HTTPS inspection. This will allow TMG to peer into encrypted traffic in order to better determine the payload type, which could include viruses or other malicious content. GlobalMantics wants to make sure that the company is protected even if users try to bypass their inspection systems using this encrypted traffic. HTTPS inspection can provide the ability for the company to protect itself from attacks that are wrapped inside encryption wrappers. Encrypted communication thwarts efforts to use many of Threat Management Gateway's best protection and efficiency mechanisms, including malware inspection and proxy services. Worse, encryption can allow users to actively avoid organizational policies. For example, through the use of public SSL-enabled proxy servers, users can bypass your carefully crafted policies and do whatever they like. They can browse to SSL-based malware-infested websites, or even explore sites that are prohibited by URL filtering through the use of public SSL-based anonymous proxy servers. So using HTTPS inspection to add a further layer of defense makes sense for many companies, including GlobalMantics. So what do you have to do to make this HTTPS inspection system work in Threat Management Gateway? You've got to enable the service. By default, HTTPS inspection is disabled. So everything we've done up to this point has not enabled us to look into HTTPS packets. You then have to create or import a certificate that's going to be used by the service. This certificate is going to be used to open up everything that's SSL based on your network. You then have to deploy the certificate to all client machines that will use the service. You can deploy via Active Directory, or you can deploy the certificate manually. This certificate will provide a certification chain to fool the client into believing that the Threat Management Gateway server is authoritative for everything, which is good because you trust your Threat Management Gateway system. You then have to manage your certificate validation policy as well as client notifications. Do you want users to know that their encrypted traffic is being monitored? And then ongoing, you have to maintain the service. This may include creating exclusions from time to time and things like that. So how do you enable HTTPS inspection? Well, you open up HTTPS inspection properties. That's pretty easy to do, and we're going to do that in just a few minutes. And you would select the Enable HTTPS Inspection checkbox and choose from a number of options. 1, do you want to inspect the traffic and validate site certificates? Or do you not want to inspect traffic but validate site certificates only? Block HTTPS traffic if the certificate is not valid. Basically, the first option gives you everything. You're going to inspect the traffic and validate site certificates. The second option is not going to inspect actual traffic, but it's going to make sure that site certificates are valid. If they're not valid, then HTTPS traffic will be blocked because nefarious denizens of the underworld at times try to use SSL to fool users into thinking that they're accessing a secure site. However, it is sometimes difficult for these folks to get certificates that are valid. So, Threat Management Gateway can help you on that front in making sure that certificates that are accessed by your users are at least valid. In order to work, however, you have to have an HTTPS inspection certificate on the Threat Management Gateway system as well as deployed throughout your organization. And there are two options for certificate handling with HTTPS inspection. You can use Forefront Threat Management Gateway to generate a certificate. This is going to start a wizard that will help you create a self-signed certificate that you can use with the service. Or you can import a certificate. If you've got a certificate that you can already use, you can import it for use with the service. We'll be reviewing certificate options shortly. When you generate a Threat Management Gateway HTTPS inspection certificate, you have a couple of options, including an expiration option of never or a date that you specify, as well as an issuer statement, which is where you can provide a note about what the certificate does. Providing this note at least helps people on the other end when they're looking at their certificate store get a better understanding for the purpose of the certificate. You may want to have a certificate expire if you want to be able to refresh your security policies from time to time as well. And again, if you have an existing certificate, you can import it for use with the Threat Management Gateway HTTPSI service. Just like everything else that we've seen so far in Threat Management Gateway, you can create both source and destination exceptions. You may, for example, want to exclude the computers that are in use by the GlobalMantics executives from HTTPS inspection in order to ensure that their work is constantly private. Remember, HTTPS inspection is effectively breaking open HTTPS communications. Some of this information may make its way into Threat Management Gateway logs. So if you don't fully trust the people that are running your HTTPSI and Threat Management Gateway system, executives may want to be exempted from this particular service. Fortunately for GlobalMantics, their people are of the highest caliber and they don't have any problems, so they're not going to be making any exclusions at this point. You should, however, be prepared to carefully manage the exclusions list, particularly when you initially deploy the service. The reason is because you're going to find some things that simply won't work with the service, and you need to exclude those sites in order for your users to be able to continue to use them. For example, HTTPS doesn't work when the other end uses self-signed certificates. You can use one for your own service, but not browse to a site that's using a self-signed certificate. All the clients using HTTPSI must belong to the same Active Directory domain as the Threat Management Gateway server. Extended validation certificates are also not supported, and even using different browsers can pose problems because of the different way that browsers handle certificates. GlobalMantics uses Internet Explorer, which conforms to all of the defaults that are necessary to operate. With HTTPSI, you can also manage some additional certificate validation options. For example, you can block expired certificates after a certain number of days. And you can block server certificates that aren't yet valid. Perhaps they've been issued, but they have not yet taken effect, so you can block them from being used. You can also check for server certificate revocation. There are times when server certificates are revoked, and you want to make sure that you stay up with that. User notification is a pretty important point here. HTTPS inspection can introduce delay into an HTTPS-based session that may concern the user. It can also change the way that basically connections operate because you're breaking open the connection of what the user believes is fully encrypted end-to-end. If you want your users to be notified that HTTPS inspection is taking place, make sure you select a checkbox next to Notify Users that the HTTPS traffic is being inspected. This way, users will know that when something is taking a little bit longer than it seems like it should, what's going on behind the scenes at the company. And this way you're not surprising them and you're sort of being transparent about what security policies are in place and what kind of things are going to be looked at. I wanted to get to the good stuff because we're going to go over to the Threat Management Gateway server now and we're going to configure HTTPS inspection for GlobalMantics. For all the reasons outlined earlier, GlobalMantics wants to enable HTTPS inspection, and they're going to use a self-signed certificate for this purpose. User notifications will be enabled because GlobalMantics believes in being transparent with their employees about what steps are being taken to protect the company and how it can affect their work. In order to better learn the mechanics behind how the certificate operates, it will be manually deployed to the GlobalMantics test workstation. To test the service, we'll browse to HTTPS www.facebook.com, and we're going to be looking for the following outcomes. 1. A seamless browsing experience for the user. In other words, they may see the notification, but they don't have to do much in order to be able to get to the site. A pop-up notification that the HTTPS inspection is in progress, and we'll look at the certification path that shows the use of the HTTPSI certificate. Now, during this process, we're going to be doing a number of things. We're going to configure HTTPS inspection, create the self-signed certificate, and deploy that certificate to the GlobalMantics test workstation. So there'll be a lot happening, but it's going to be better than reading the PowerPoint. So from here, we're going to move over to the lab environment and move on with the implementation of HTTPS inspection. And here we are at the console, and in the navigation area, I've selected Web Access Policy, and you're going to see as one of the tasks that's available is to configure HTTPS inspection. As you may have guessed, that's the option I'm going to click. And this starts a properties box for us that gives us some information about what we need to do next. First of all, we want to enable HTTPS inspection. And we're going to choose the default option, which is to inspect traffic and validate site certificates. As I mentioned before, we have to do something about a certificate. So we're going to allow Forefront to generate a certificate by clicking the Generate button right here in the window. We'll leave the default issuer name of Microsoft Forefront TMG HTTPS Inspection Certificate Authority, and for an issuer statement, I'll just put HTTPSI. And then click Generate Certificate Now. And you're going to see that we do indeed have a certificate, which is a good thing. One thing I'd like to point out is this certificate doesn't really never expire. You can't really have a certificate that never expires, so Microsoft puts the longest possible length it can on the certificate, which means that this certificate will expire in 2048. If you still have your existing machines in 2048, something is wrong. So this is really not a bad thing. And you can get details about the certificate if you like. These are some of the information we already provided. And there we go. And we'll click Install the certificate. This will allow us to install it in the right store. And we're going to place certificates in the following store, Browse, and we're going to put it in the Trusted Root Certification Authorities. And click OK. Next. Finish. This is basically telling us you're about to do something that could be really dumb. If you don't know where the certificate came from, this would be dumb because you're basically going to put a certificate in your root store that allows you to do anything it wants. In this case, however, we know where it came from, so we do want to install the certificate. And click OK. Close. And if I clicked on HTTPS Inspection Trusted Root CA Certificate Options, I'd have a couple of options for how I'd like to deploy this certificate. One is by using automatically through Active Directory, or two is manually deploying the certificate to each computer. Well, automatically is no fun because that happens automatically. So let's do this manually so that you can see what you'd have to take. If I click Domain Administrator Credentials for automatically, I just have to provide the username and password for an administrative user. I'm going to do it just because this is how we would ultimately want to do it in a domain environment. And it succeeded. So basically place it in Active Directory, and then it'll be deployed out to all the machines. Or I can choose to deploy it manually. When I choose to deploy manually, I would have to export the certificate to a file, which is what I'm going to do. So I selected manually, and I'm going to choose Export to File. And I'm going to export it to the C drive into a folder called HTTPSI cert. And you're going to see here that it allows me to export it as a CER or a certificate file. And it'll be for GlobalMantics. So click Save. And then I'll click OK. And we'll take a look at the rest of the configuration. We have some destination exceptions. So these are sites that are exempt from HTTPS inspection. We're not going to have any sites that are exempt for now. Then we have source exceptions. So what clients would I like to exclude from HTTPS inspection? The certificate validation settings we talked about before, and client notification. I want to enable client notification for GlobalMantics. So I want to select the checkbox next to notify users that their HTTPS traffic is being inspected, and click Apply, and then OK. Now, as you know, these settings really haven't taken yet until I click the Apply button up here. So I'll click Apply, Apply again, and after a couple of minutes, all of these new settings will have taken effect and HTTPS inspection is taking place. But we're not quite done. We have to go to a client side now and deploy that certificate in a way that allows the computer to believe that the threat management gateway server is a trusted root and is capable of talking on behalf of the client. Basically, the way HTTPS inspection works is the threat management gateway server sort of takes over the communication stream for the client. So on behalf of the client, the server is making all the requests to the external website that's being accessed via HTTPS. It sort of acts as a middleman. That's one of the reasons, by the way, why extended validation certificates don't work, because they require a higher level of trust, and Threat Management Gateway gets in the way of that. So I'm going to go over to a client now, and we're going to deploy the certificate to the certificate store, and then we're going to test and make sure that all of this works as expected. We're now at a client. So what do? Well, it's easy. We go to the Start menu and we type MMC. This starts the Microsoft Management Console. What we're going to do is we're going to open up the certificates area so that we can manage certificates and add them to the right store in the right area of the certificate store. So once we have the Microsoft Management Console open, we'll go to File and we'll choose Add Remove Snap-in. When we get to the Snap-in menu, choose Certificates and click Add. And we want to be under the auspices of the computer account here. Click Next, and we want to work with the local computer, so we'll click Finish. And then click OK, and you're going to see that we now have certificates. This is a good thing. Well, we're going to browse down through, and we're going to see that we've got quite a few things here. We've got the Trusted Root Certification Authorities with a lot of stuff. That's where we want to put our new certificate. So I'm going to right-click Certificates here, and I'm going to choose All Tasks Import. This is going to start a certificate import wizard. On the first page, I'll simply click Next. Now I've got to decide where I got to find my file. Well, I saved it out on the server, on the Threat Management Gateway server, in a folder called HTTPSI cert. So I'll double-click that folder, and there is my certificate. So I'll double-click it, and there we go. There's my whole certificate. It's on the Threat Management Gateway server, on the C drive, in a folder called HTTPSI cert, and the file name is HTTPSI-GM. I'll click Next. Now I want to place all the certificates into this store. If you don't place it into this store, you won't get notifications, by the way. In fact, nothing will happen down here, which you'll see in just a minute. We want something to happen. Click Next, and click Finish. And you'll be told that the import was successful. And indeed, when we look, here it is. If I double-click the certificate, you're going to see that this is indeed the HTTPS inspection certificate that we created on the Threat Management Gateway server. But does it work? Well, let's find out. I'll start up Internet Explorer, and I'll go to HTTPS Facebook.com. Notice I get a little window down here that says Secure Connection Inspection, and I accidentally clicked it. The HTTPS connection initiated by Internet Explorer to this site is being inspected according to company policy. I can click this balloon to manage how outbound inspection notifications are shown, which I did before. And you can see that this opens up the client properties, and I get to the Secure Connection Inspection tab, and I have the checkbox next to notify me when content sent to secure websites is inspected. But I can also choose not to have, on a user basis, that information displayed for particular websites. It might get annoying every time I go to Facebook or to Bank of America or something along those lines to continually get those notifications. And you'll see as I go to other sites, once again, I'm being told that it's being inspected. And again, Threat Management Gateway is sort of taking over the connection on the behalf of this client. So it's telling you what's happening. Now, if we look at the certificate details, we're going to see the certificate details here, or the path. The Bank of America certificate is subordinate to our HTTPS Inspection Certification Authority. Now, how can this be? Well, one other part of the process is the fact that Threat Management Gateway recreates the certificate from the other side as a part of this process. And that's really how it works its magic. It interrupts and intercepts the communication from the client to the secure site, and then recreates the certificate. It basically takes over the connection and presents it back to the client in a way that allows Threat Management Gateway to perform additional inspection of the content. So from an outcomes perspective, we did have a seamless experience. The user only got a little pop-up. It didn't actually interrupt anything. The pop-up notification worked, and we saw a certification path that showed the use of the HTTPS inspection certificate. In this lesson, we went over what HTTPS inspection can accomplish for the company, and you learn how to enable HTTPS inspection, as well as gain an understanding for how some of the management options you choose will affect the HTTPS inspection certificate. We learned how to generate the HTTPS certificate and how to exclude sites from HTTPS inspection. We looked at some certificate validation options that you have with Threat Management Gateway, as well as what you can do to make sure users are notified that HTTPS inspection is taking place. Finally, we configured HTTPS inspection for Global Mantics and put everything that we talked about earlier into action and successfully browsed at www.facebook.com with an encrypted session that could still be monitored by Threat Management Gateway. Thank you for listening, and I look forward to seeing you in the next lesson.